At 6:45 in the morning, the border terminal was as ordinary as any other day lines of travelers, dragging tired feet, the low hum of announcements echoing through the hall, and officers checking passports with their usual calm, practiced expressions. No one imagined that this quiet morning would soon become the center of a mystery that would shake the entire checkpoint. And in the middle of it all, stood a woman who looked like the last person anyone would ever suspect. Her name at least. The name written on the passport was Sarah Malik. She looked like someone you would simply pass by without noticing. Mid-30s, soft-spoken, dressed in a simple gray shawl and black bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look rushed. In fact, she carried the calmness of someone who had done absolutely nothing wrong. She even smiled politely at the officers as she approached the counter. That was the strange part. The kind of strange that you only understand later. Sarah had boarded the early morning bus that crossed from the small border town into the neighboring country. People on the bus remembered her clearly, not because she stood out but because she didn't. One woman even described her as the quiet type who keeps to herself. Another said she seemed like she was just traveling to meet family. No one felt anything unusual. No tension, no fear, nothing suspicious, but the truth has a way of hiding behind the most ordinary things. When the bus arrived at the border, everyone got down with their bags. Officers were checking luggage routinely, selecting random bags for inspection. Some people looked annoyed by the process. Some were impatient, but Sarah, she stood calmly, hands folded in front of her, waiting for her turn. Her black bag rested gently at her feet, like it contained nothing more than clothes or snacks for the journey. One officer later said something that struck everyone. She was too calm, not scared, not angry, not confused, just calm. Sarah stepped forward when her name was called. The officer lifted her bag from the ground. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. A normal kind of weight, the kind that makes you think nothing unusual is inside. He placed it on the table, unzipped the first compartment, and glanced through it. Everything looked routine: clothes, neatly folded, toiletries, a small pouch of makeup, normal things, normal patterns. But then he felt something strange at the bottom layer. A second lining, a hidden base of the bag that felt thicker than usual. He pressed it gently and felt a small, solid shape underneath. Something that clearly wasn't fabric. Something deliberately tucked away. He looked at her. Sarah maintained the same peaceful expression, like she had no idea what he was about to ask. Her eyes didn't shift. Her breathing didn't change. For a moment, even the officer hesitated. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was imagining it. He had checked thousands of bags before. Sometimes things just felt odd without reason. But protocol is protocol. He unzipped the bag's bottom layer. At that exact moment, something changed in Sarah's face just for a split second. Something so small that most people would miss it. Her eyes flickered. Her shoulders stiffened so slightly it looked like a breath being held. And then she went back to looking calm. That was when the officer knew. This bag contains something she does not want us to see. He carefully pulled the lining apart. Another officer stepped forward to assist. Travelers around them started watching, sensing that something was going on. The air around the checking table shifted quiet, thick with curiosity and tension. The officer reached inside the hidden compartment. The bag made a soft thud as something inside moved. The crowd leaned forward. Sarah's fingers tightened around the edges of the counter. The officer slowly lifted the object toward the light. And that is where everything changed. Because the moment the officers saw what was inside, the calm routine of the morning broke instantly. Radio calls started buzzing. Supervisors rushed to the table. Travelers stepped back. And Sarah, she simply stood there, finally losing the stillness she had held so tightly since the moment she entered the terminal. What the officers uncovered wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't ordinary either. It was something that demanded answers. Something that didn't match her passport, her story, or her calm behavior. Something that connected her to a truth she had tried to keep hidden for a long time. Within minutes, officers surrounded her. She didn't run, she didn't protest, she didn't even try to explain. She just lowered her eyes, as if accepting that the moment she had feared had finally arrived. And yet no one still understood why she had it, why she hid it, why she risked everything to carry it across the border. Or what story lay behind that silent, expressionless face. But when the supervisor opened the object again more carefully, more completely, the truth began to unfold in ways no one expected. And what they discovered next was only the beginning of a mystery no one had seen coming. Because inside that bag was something that didn't just expose Sarah. It revealed a secret that traced back years, crossing cities, families, and memories she wanted to bury forever. The moment the supervisor lifted the object again, the officers exchanged confused looks. It was clearly valuable, clearly old, and clearly connected to something much bigger than a simple travel inspection. But nothing about it made immediate sense. It wasn't money. It wasn't anything illegal. It was something that carried history, something that looked like it belonged to someone else entirely. Asterisk and Sarah, standing a few steps away, watched silently as they handled it. Her calm expression had faded just enough to show worry, not panic, not fear, just a kind of quiet sadness, as if she already knew what memories were about to come back to life. Asterisk, one of the officers gently placed the item on the table. People nearby tried to peek, but the officers blocked the view. The supervisor radioed the main office for guidance, his voice low but tense. When he turned back, his eyes went straight to Sarah. Asterisk, where did you get this? He asked. Asterisk, she didn't answer. She looked down at her hands, rubbing her thumb over her fingertips like someone remembering something painful. The officer repeated the question. She still stayed silent. That silence bothered them more than anything inside the bag. Asterisk, as the minutes passed, the atmosphere around her grew heavier. The bus driver waited impatiently. Passengers whispered among themselves. Some thought it might be a passport issue. Others thought it was a misunderstanding. But no one imagined the truth that what she carried had roots deeper than the officers could see, stretching back years into a past she had tried to outrun. Asterisk, after a moment, the officers escorted her to a small interview room near the checkpoint. It wasn't a criminal room, just a simple space with 2 chairs, a desk, and a glass window looking into the hall. She sat down slowly, her bag placed on the table between them. Asterisk, the supervisor entered with 2 officers and closed the door quietly. He didn't raise his voice or use harsh words. That wasn't necessary. The mystery itself was loud enough. Asterisk, we need to understand, he said gently. This object, it's not ordinary. Why was it hidden? Asterisk, Sarah finally looked up. For the first time, her calmness cracked. Not fully, but enough to show that something inside her was unsettled, something she had been holding together for far too long. Asterisk, it's not mine, she whispered. Those words changed the room. The supervisor leaned forward. Then whose is it? Asterisk, she hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. Someone I lost. Asterisk, the officers exchanged glances. The answer wasn't enough to explain anything, but it revealed one thing, clearly whatever she was carrying wasn't about money or danger. It was about someone important, someone whose absence weighed heavily on her. Asterisk, the supervisor placed the object on the table between them. Then tell us the truth. From the beginning. Asterisk, but instead of explaining, Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, as if deciding whether the truth was even safe to share. When she opened them, there was a distant look like she was seeing something far away, something painful. Asterisk, it started years ago, she said softly, before I ever thought of crossing this border. Asterisk, the officer stayed quiet, letting her speak at her own pace. Asterisk, I grew up in a small neighborhood, she continued. Life was simple, nothing special, but there was one person, someone who meant everything to me. Her voice softened. My younger sister. Asterisk, one officer immediately noted this down. Another kept his eyes on her face, watching every small shift in emotion. Asterisk, she was the kind of person everyone noticed, Sarah said with a faint smile. Not because she tried, but because she had this light in her. Everywhere she went, she made people feel safe, loved, even when she struggled herself. She never let anyone else feel alone. Her voice cracked slightly at the last sentence. What happened to her? The supervisor asked gently. Asterisk, Sarah didn't answer right away. She looked at her hands again, twisting her fingers as though trying to hold on to something slipping away. Asterisk, she disappeared, she finally said. The room fell silent. Disappeared? When? The officer asked. 10 years ago, she replied. The officers paused. 10 years was a long time, too long for simple misunderstandings or temporary problems. Asterisk, did you report it? The supervisor asked. Asterisk, she nodded slowly. Yes, but nothing came of it. No leads, no messages, no sightings. It was like she faded into air. She took a shaky breath. People eventually stopped asking. They said maybe she left on her own, maybe she started a new life. But I knew her. She wouldn't leave without telling me. Her voice carried the weight of a decade of unanswered questions, and this object, the supervisor said carefully, is connected to her. Asterisk, Sarah nodded. Very. Asterisk, how? He asked. Asterisk, but instead of answering directly, she looked up, her eyes deeper, heavier than before. Asterisk, I found it 2 weeks ago, she whispered. Inside a package that arrived at my home, no sender name, no return address, just my name, written in her handwriting. Asterisk, one officer leaned forward, confused. You're sure it was her handwriting after 10 years? Asterisk, her reply was firm. I'd know her handwriting anywhere. Asterisk, the supervisor's face tightened slightly. A 10-year-old disappearance, a mysterious package, a hidden object, a border crossing, and a woman who looked calm until that bag was opened. The puzzle pieces were scattered, but they all pointed towards something much bigger than a simple artifact. Asterisk, what else was in the package? He asked. Asterisk, nothing, she replied. Just this, wrapped in her old scarf. Asterisk, did the package include any note? Asterisk, she hesitated, then looked away. Yes, but I didn't bring it. Asterisk, what did it say? Asterisk, for a long moment, She didn't answer. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were inching closer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Asterisk, it said, find me before they do. Every officer in the room froze. The supervisor repeated, who are they? Asterisk, Sarah shook her head. I don't know. She never talked about anyone who might hurt her. That's why I don't understand how she vanished, or why this object mattered enough for her to send it back to me after all these years. Asterisk, her voice grew unsteady. I don't even know if she's alive. Asterisk, the officers exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer a simple border inspection. This was a missing person case resurfacing after 10 silent years, and the key to understanding it was sitting inside a hidden compartment of an ordinary black travel bag. Asterisk, the supervisor leaned forward, his tone far more serious now. Sarah, if your sister is in danger, we need to know everything. This object, it could help us trace her, but you have to tell us what it is. Asterisk, Sarah looked at him, conflicted. Her eyes held fear, grief, and something else, something like a promise she had made to herself long ago. Asterisk, I'm not sure. She finally said, I only know it mattered to her. She used to hide it when we were younger. She never told anyone where it came from. She only said that one day, someone might come looking for it. Asterisk, and that someone might be dangerous. The officer asked. Asterisk, she nodded slowly. Yes. Asterisk, the supervisor looked at the object again, studying every detail. It wasn't large, but it was crafted with care. Old, but well preserved. Something symbolic. Something that carried a story of its own. Asterisk, why were you crossing the border with it? He asked. Asterisk, Sarah swallowed hard, because the package also included a place, a location, and I think that's where she wants me to go. Asterisk, and you are going alone. Asterisk, yes. Asterisk, the supervisor exhaled, trying to piece things together. So let me understand. After 10 years of silence, your missing sister contacts you through a mysterious package. She sends you this item, tells you to find her, and gives you a destination across the border. Sarah nodded. And you didn't tell anyone. Asterisk, no one would believe me, she whispered, not after so long. Asterisk, the room went still. The officers were no longer dealing with a traveler, they were dealing with a woman in the middle of a mystery that had just reopened itself after a decade. And now, whatever path she was on, they were standing right at the edge of it. Asterisk, but before they could ask anything else, a sharp knock sounded on the glass window. Another officer urgently signaled the supervisor to step outside. Asterisk, the supervisor frowned and left the room. Asterisk, Sarah watched him go, her breath uneven. A minute later, the supervisor returned with a look that made everyone stand up straighter. Asterisk, we just received information, he said slowly, that someone has been asking about you at the first checkpoint, and they left before we could speak to them. Sarah's face went pale. Do you know who it could be? The officer asked quietly. Asterisk, she looked down, then looked up with fear in her eyes. Asterisk, I think, she whispered, they found me first. Asterisk, and the truth behind the object still remained hidden. Sarah's voice trembled as the words left her mouth, and for the first time since the officers had stopped her, there was real fear in her eyes, not the fear of being questioned, but the fear of being found. The room fell silent. Even the faint noise of the border terminal outside felt distant now, fading under the weight of her confession. Asterisk, the supervisor leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sarah, who exactly do you think is looking for you? Asterisk, she shook her head slowly. I don't know their names, I never saw their faces. But my sister, she mentioned them once. Long before she disappeared. Asterisk, the officers exchanged uneasy glances. The story was turning darker, not in a violent way, but in a way that hinted at secrets people didn't talk about, openly secrets tied to trust, identity, and the fear of losing someone forever. Asterisk, what did she say? The supervisor asked. Asterisk, Sarah hesitated. You could see her struggling between the urge to protect her sister's memory and the need to finally tell someone the truth. After a long breath, she spoke. Asterisk, she told me that sometimes, people follow the ones who carry things they shouldn't. Not expensive things, not dangerous things, but things that belong to someone else, someone important. Asterisk, the officers didn't fully understand, but they listened carefully. Asterisk, my sister wasn't involved in anything illegal. Sarah continued quickly. She wasn't that type of person. She stayed away from trouble. She lived quietly, but one day she came home shaken. She said someone had asked her strange questions at her workplace. She didn't know why. She didn't know who they were. She said they were watching her. Asterisk, and this item, the officer said, glancing at the object on the table. You think it's connected? I know it is, she replied softly, before anyone could ask more. The supervisor received another update through his earpiece. He moved closer to the wall, listening carefully, his face sharpening with concern. When he returned, his expression confirmed that the situation had shifted again. Asterisk, we checked the cameras, he said quietly. The person asking about you was not a regular traveler. He stayed near the bus terminal for exactly 4 minutes, asked about you twice, and left without taking any transport. Asterisk Sarah's breath caught. Did you see his face? Asterisk no. He had a cap pulled low, but he seemed like he was waiting for something. Asterisk Sarah closed her eyes. He wasn't waiting. He was confirming. Asterisk confirming what? Asterisk that I'm here. Asterisk this was no longer about a simple search. It was becoming a layered mystery, part emotional, part psychological. Part rooted in the unknown past of two sisters who had once lived ordinary lives. Asterisk the supervisor sat down again, but this time with a different posture, not just as an officer, but as someone piecing together a story. Why would someone track your sister? Why would someone follow you now? What's the connection? Asterisk Sarah stared at the object on the table. The officers noticed that she didn't even want to touch it again. It wasn't fear of the item itself, she was afraid of what it represented. Asterisk when we were younger, she said, voice distant. My sister found something unusual. Not valuable in a money sense, but meaningful, something that belonged to our mother. Asterisk your mother, an officer asked gently. Asterisk Sarah nodded. She passed away when we were very young. We hardly knew anything about her. But my sister, she always tried to understand more. She believed our mother left something behind for us. Something meant for the future. Asterisk her eyes softened as she remembered. My sister kept it hidden. She said it wasn't safe. I never understood why a family item could be unsafe. Until now. Asterisk and you think this object is what she found? The supervisor asked. Asterisk yes. Asterisk but why hide it in a bag and try to cross the border? He pushed carefully. Asterisk because the note she sent me, Sarah, whispered, had coordinates. A rural location across the border. A place where she said everything started. A place I needed to go to understand what she couldn't tell me. Asterisk the supervisor slowly exhaled. This wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was turning into a family mystery that spanned years, borders, and generations. Asterisk one officer walked to the window and looked out toward the terminal. If someone tracked her here, they might be close. Asterisk Sarah's fingers tightened around her sleeves. My sister trusted me to find her. But now, I don't know if I can. Asterisk you're not alone now, the officer replied. We'll help you, but you have to trust us. Asterisk she nodded, but her silence spoke louder than her agreement. Trust was hard for her. It had been since the day her sister vanished. Asterisk outside the room. The border terminal was returning to its usual rhythm. People lined up. Officers stamped passports. Announcements echoed overhead. But inside this small room, 3 officers and 1 woman were slowly unraveling a story that no one else in the building even sensed. Asterisk. The supervisor turned the object again in his hands, studying it carefully. It wasn't marked. It wasn't dangerous. But it carried a strange weight, like it represented something unfinished. Asterisk, he looked up. What exactly did your mother do? Before she passed, asterisk Sarah blinked, surprised by the question. I'm not sure. People said she worked with a charity group, traveling to different villages. Helping families, nothing unusual. Asterisk, did she leave behind any documents? Photos, asterisk, no. Almost nothing. Asterisk, another officer wrote quickly. The lack of information was too strange to ignore. Asterisk, the supervisor leaned back, thinking deeply. Sarah, sometimes people disappear because of the things they know. Sometimes they disappear because of the people they are connected to. Sometimes they disappear because of something they're protecting. Asterisk, Sarah's throat tightened. You think my sister was protecting something? Asterisk, he didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, when did she start acting different? Before she vanished. Asterisk, Sarah looked down, remembering. About 6 months before, she would check the windows at night. She kept her phone close. She started walking home using different routes. I asked her what was wrong, but she always said she was fine. Asterisk, the supervisor's voice softened. People don't act like that without reason. Asterisk, and she never told me. Sarah said, tears forming. If I had known, maybe I could have stopped whatever happened. The room fell quiet again. Then the officer near the window said something that made everyone turn toward him. Asterisk supervisor. Someone is standing on the far side of the terminal. He's not moving, just watching the building. Sarah's heart dropped. Can you see his face? The supervisor asked. Asterisk no, but he isn't carrying luggage. He isn't in line. He's just standing there. Asterisk, the supervisor stood immediately. Keep your eyes on him. Asterisk, Sarah's voice trembled. It's them. I know it. Asterisk, we don't know that yet. The supervisor replied calmly, but we're taking precautions. He called for more officers to patrol the terminal. Sarah watched him anxiously. What are you going to do? Asterisk first, he said firmly, we're increasing security around you. Second, we're going to examine this object properly. Whatever your sister was trying to protect, whatever she wanted you to find, we'll uncover it together. Asterisk, but what if it's too late? She whispered. Asterisk, the supervisor looked at her with steady eyes. Then we catch up. Asterisk, but deep inside, even he felt the tension rising. There was a missing sister, a mysterious package, a hidden object, a decade-old disappearance, and now someone watching from a distance. Asterisk, and yet, the real truth hadn't even emerged. Asterisk, not where the object came from, not why her sister vanished, not what danger was closing in. Asterisk, and not who, or what, Sarah was actually running from. Asterisk, the answers remained out there, just beyond reach. Asterisk, and the real mystery was only beginning to unfold. The supervisor's steps grew sharper as he moved across the room, his mind racing through every possibility. Sarah watched him anxiously, her hands trembling now. She had been holding herself together for so long that this moment, this sudden shift into danger, was beginning to break through the calm she always tried to maintain. Asterisk, outside the window, the figure still hadn't moved. He stood near the far side of the terminal, blending into the shadows, as if he was waiting for something, or someone. It wasn't clear whether he could see into the room, but Sarah felt his presence like a weight pressing against the glass. Asterisk, one of the younger officers stepped back from the window. He's not looking around, he said quietly. He's focused on this building. Asterisk, Sarah's breath caught. That's how they used to watch my sister, she whispered, from a distance, never approaching, never speaking, just watching. Asterisk, the supervisor turned to her. How many times did she mention being followed? Asterisk, 3 times, Sarah replied. At first, she thought it was nothing, but then she said she felt it everywhere she went, even inside our home. Asterisk, another officer asked gently, did she ever describe the person? Asterisk, Sarah shook her head. No, she said they always stayed just far enough away. She couldn't see faces, only silhouettes. The room grew colder with every word. The supervisor looked down at the object again. Whatever this is, it must hold a truth someone wants to bury. Asterisk, Sarah nodded. My sister used to say that some truths don't stay hidden forever. They find their way back. Asterisk, the tension thickened. The officers looked at one another as if they were standing on the edge of something far more dangerous than a simple border case. This wasn't about traveling. This wasn't about luggage. This was something deeper, something tied to the past, the missing sister, and the mysterious people who never fully revealed themselves. Asterisk, the supervisor finally spoke. We need to understand what's inside this object. Asterisk, Sarah's eyes widened. You can't open it. Asterisk, why? Asterisk, because my sister said it should only be opened at the place she named. If I opened it early, she said it could make things worse. Asterisk, what does that mean? Asterisk, I don't know, she whispered. She never explained. Before the supervisor could reply, his radio crackled again with urgency. Sir, the man outside has started moving. The voice reported, he's walking toward the terminal doors. Asterisk, the supervisor tensed. Is he alone? Asterisk, yes. Asterisk, is he carrying anything? Asterisk, negative. Walking as if he knows exactly where he's going. Asterisk, Sarah felt her heart pounding. He's coming here. Asterisk, the supervisor moved to the door. Lock this room. Don't let anyone enter except me. Asterisk, 2 officers secured the door immediately. The third stayed at the window, monitoring the figure. Sarah sat in her chair, holding her elbows tightly. The pressure around her chest grew heavier with every passing second. Asterisk, the officer at the window spoke again. He's inside the building now. Asterisk, is he heading toward this hallway? The supervisor asked. Asterisk, yes. But slowly, like he's trying not to draw attention. Asterisk, the hallway outside grew quieter. The echo of distant footsteps became faint but steady. Sarah felt her pulse thudding in her ears. She hadn't been this close to danger since the night her sister vanished. The night she heard their gate creak open, footsteps outside, and then nothing but silence. Asterisk, the footsteps outside the room grew louder. Asterisk, the supervisor motioned for everyone to stay quiet. He pressed his ear to the door. The footsteps paused. Right outside. Asterisk, for a few seconds. No one moved. Even the terminal noise seemed muted, as if time itself was holding its breath. Then, a soft knock. 3 taps. Sarah's eyes widened with terror. Asterisk, that was the same pattern. She whispered. The same knock my sister heard before she disappeared. Asterisk, the supervisor signaled everyone to hold their positions. He didn't open the door. Instead, he stood perfectly still, listening. The knock didn't come again. The footsteps resumed, but this time slower, as if the man was waiting for a reaction. Then the footsteps faded down the hallway. Where is he going now? The supervisor radioed. Heading toward the exit, sir, came the reply. Keep eyes on him. Do not approach. Asterisk, the officers in the room took deep breaths, trying to process what just happened. But Sarah wasn't relieved. She stared at the door, as if expecting the knock to return. Asterisk, the supervisor approached her. Sarah, did your sister ever say why they used that knock? Asterisk, she said it was a warning. She replied quietly, but she never told me who created it. Only that if I ever heard it, I should run, and yet here you are, he said. Sarah looked down. Because running doesn't help if they always find you. Asterisk, the supervisor sat across from her, his voice steady. We need to understand what your sister got involved in. Was there anyone from your childhood? Anyone your mother trusted? Anyone who knew your family well? Sarah shook her head. Our mother didn't talk about her past. She moved often, from one village to another, always helping people, always staying quiet. She didn't make close friends, and when she passed, we didn't know who to ask about her. So you think your sister found something about your mother? Yes. Her voice cracked. I think she found something she wasn't supposed to. And you think these people want it? I know they do. The tension in the room rose again as the object on the table seemed to glow with meaning. It was small, simple, harmless on the surface, but inside it held the reason a mother stayed silent. A sister disappeared, and a strange figure knocked on a border office door. Suddenly, the officer at the window spoke again. Sir, the man who left these joined by another person outside. They're talking, and now they're pointing toward this building. Sarah covered her mouth. Two people now, two silhouettes, two quiet threats in broad daylight. Any chance they're just travelers? The supervisor asked. The officer didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. The supervisor turned back to Sarah. If they're watching you this closely, then they know why you're here, which means they know where you're heading next. Sarah felt the panic rising in her chest. They can't know the location. My sister didn't write the full address. She only sent coordinates. The supervisor shook his head. Coordinates are enough for people who know how to track. Sarah's face drained of color. So they'll go there first. And that means, the supervisor said quietly, whatever your sister wants you to find, they'll try to get it before you. Sarah leaned forward, her voice breaking. We can't let them. My sister might still be alive. She needs me. She trusted me. The supervisor placed a calm hand on the table. Then we have to move before they do. How? She asked, trembling. The supervisor looked at the object. We start by unlocking the secret your mother left behind. But my sister said, your sister isn't here. He interrupted gently, and time is running out. The room went quiet. The officers stepped closer. Sarah's heartbeat grew louder. The supervisor's fingers tightened around the object. And in that moment one decision. One choice. One step toward the truth. Was about to push all of them straight into the heart of the mystery. Right into the point where everything would collide. But the object remained closed. The truth still hidden. And the danger waiting outside. Was only getting closer. The moment the old photo slipped from Daniel's hands, something inside him tightened. It wasn't just the strange mark on the wall or the eerie silence. Inside the house it was the feeling that someone had been there recently, someone who didn't want to be seen. As he crouched to pick up the photo again, he noticed fresh dust smudges near the window, as if someone had pressed their fingers there only hours before. That single detail made the air in the room feel heavier, almost as if the house itself was trying to warn him. He stepped back, examining the photo more carefully. It showed the Carter family standing in front of the same house, smiling. But in the far corner, barely visible, stood a shadowed figure behind them, almost impossible to notice unless you looked closely. Daniel's heart began to race. This wasn't part of the original case file. He had studied every detail years ago. So where did this version come from? And why was it hidden here? Before he could think further, the hallway floor creaked off, slow, like someone shifting their weight. Daniel froze. The house was empty, or at least it should have been. He moved quietly, stepping toward the sound. Every step felt louder than the last. When he reached the end of the hallway, he saw the basement door slightly open, the same door he knew he had closed earlier. A cold draft slipped through the gap, carrying a faint smell of damp soil. His instincts told him not to go down. But something else, something deeper pushed him forward. As he descended, his flashlight flickered again, landing on a set of footprints on the dusty stairs. They weren't old. They weren't part of the Carter family's timeline. Someone else had been using this basement, someone who didn't want to be found. Daniel reached the bottom, his breath slow and controlled. The basement was darker than before, as if absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. He scanned the room, and that's when he saw a photo pinned to a support beam. This time, the picture wasn't old. It was taken recently. Very recently. It was a picture of him. Daniel stepped closer, staring in disbelief at the photo showing him entering the Carter house earlier that day. His pulse hammered in his ears. Someone was watching him. Someone was documenting his every move. His flashlight trembled slightly as he tried to make sense of it. The investigation had shifted from uncovering what happened to the Carters to understanding who was now following him. Then, just as he reached out to touch the photo, a noise echoed upstairs. Something sharp, sudden, like a door slamming shut. He jerked his head upward, realizing someone else was inside the house with him at that very moment. The basement lights flickered, and Daniel felt the pressure of time closing in on him. The case wasn't just cold anymore. It was alive, breathing, moving around him in real time. Asterisk as he rushed back up the stairs, another twist revealed itself. At the top step, laid neatly as if placed seconds before, was the same necklace Mrs. Carter was believed to have been wearing the night the family vanished. The clasp was broken, and a single long scratch marked the metal surface fresh, sharp, deliberate. Daniel picked it up carefully, feeling the weight of everything shifting at once. Whoever was inside this house was not only connected to the disappearance, they were pulling him deeper into it. Asterisk he scanned the hallway, listening, but the house had gone silent again, completely still. Every mystery he thought he understood had become something else. Something bigger and more dangerous. The real story wasn't just about a missing family anymore. Someone was rewriting the truth right in front of him, and Daniel had just stepped into the center of their plan. Asterisk, and as he moved toward the living room, the light from his flashlight caught something new. A message, written faintly across the dusty mirror. 4 words that made every muscle in his body tighten. Asterisk. Daniel stood frozen in front of the mirror, the words slowly settling into his mind. You're next to know. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a warning, one that had been building from the moment he stepped into the house. His breath turned unsteady, but he forced himself to stay focused. Whoever was behind this wanted him scared, wanted him confused. But Daniel had spent years solving cases built on fear and confusion. He wasn't about to back down now. Asterisk, he followed the cold draft, moving through the hallway, letting instinct guide him. The house felt alive, every wall carrying echoes of the Carter family. When he entered the living room, he finally saw what everything had been leading to. The old floorboards near the fireplace were shifted, as if someone had recently moved them. Daniel knelt and pulled one loose, revealing a small wooden box hidden beneath the flooring. His chest tightened. This was what the original investigation had missed. Asterisk inside the box were letters handwritten, desperate, and dated only days before the Carter family disappeared. The letters were from Mrs. Carter, written to her sister. As Daniel read, the truth unfolded. The family hadn't been taken by an outsider. They had been hiding. The father, Michael Carter, had discovered something dangerous, something about a land dispute, involving powerful local figures who wanted the Carters gone. The threats had started quietly, then grew louder, then became impossible to ignore. The family had planned to run, but they never got the chance. Asterisk as Daniel read the last letter. Footsteps echoed again, this time, steady, confident, approaching the living room. Daniel turned slowly. A man stood at the edge of the doorway. Almost expected. It was Officer Hale, someone Daniel had worked with for years, someone he trusted. But the look in Hale's eyes didn't match the man Daniel knew. Asterisk Hale stepped forward, his voice low and steady. He admitted everything. He had been part of the group involved in the land scheme, and when Michael Carter refused to back down, things escalated. The family had been moved, hidden away under the promise of protection, but in reality, they had been silenced. Hale had kept the secret buried for 10 years, and now, Daniel was getting too close. Asterisk the photos in the basement, the necklace on the stairs, the messages. All of it was Hale's way of pushing Daniel off the case, hoping fear would make him quit. But when Daniel didn't stop, Hale had no choice but to confront him now. Asterisk Daniel listened quietly, piecing together the final gaps. Every detail lined up except one. Daniel asked the question that had been bothering him from the beginning. Asterisk, if you wanted to scare me away, he said softly, why leave evidence? Why leave messages? Why lead me deeper? Asterisk Calais froze for a split second, and in that moment, Daniel understood. Hale hadn't left the messages. Someone else had, someone who wanted the truth uncovered. Asterisk, before Hale could react, a sound came from outside, car doors opening, firm voices approaching. Daniel saw the panic flash across Hale's face. Someone had tipped off the authorities. And it wasn't Daniel. Asterisk minutes later, Hale was taken into custody, shouting that this wasn't supposed to happen. Daniel stepped outside the house, breathing deeply for the first time since arriving. The main conflict was over. The truth about the Carter family was finally coming out. It wasn't the ending anyone expected, but justice had finally begun moving. Asterisk as Daniel walked toward his car, he noticed a figure standing near the edge of the property, a woman he didn't recognize. She gave him a small nod, almost thankful, before quietly disappearing into the trees. Daniel felt a chill run through him. He didn't know who she was, but something told him she had been watching everything, guiding him from a distance. Asterisk when he reached his car and opened the door, a single envelope lay on the driver's seat. No name, no signature. Inside was just one line, written in the same handwriting that had appeared on the mirror. Asterisk, asterisk. Daniel sat in his car for a long moment, holding the final note between his fingers. The handwriting was smooth, steady, almost calm, as if the person who wrote it had been watching the entire investigation unfold with a kind of quiet certainty. Some stories don't end here. The words wouldn't leave his mind. Even though the main conflict had been resolved and Officer Hale was in custody, Daniel felt there was still one last piece missing. Something about the woman standing near the trees, the hidden letters, and the years of silence still didn't add up. He drove away from the Carter property slowly, the evening sun sinking behind the hills. In the rearview mirror, the house looked small again, but the shadows around it no longer felt threatening. They felt relieved, almost grateful. The weight of 10 years had been lifted, and yet the story didn't feel complete. Daniel knew he owed the Carter family more than an answer. He owed them closure. The next morning, he visited the station. Hale's confession had already shaken the department, and officers moved with a mixture of shock and awkward distance. They greeted Daniel quietly, unsure how to approach him. Many of them had admired Hale for years. Discovering the truth behind his calm reputation was something none of them were prepared for. Daniel walked past the murmurs, heading straight to the evidence room. There was one thing he hadn't had time to examine: the locker belonging to Hale. Inside, he found files dating back years, all neatly organized. But tucked beneath them was something that stood out: an old cassette tape with the Carter case number written on it. Tape evidence wasn't common anymore, which meant this was old, possibly recorded during the first days of the investigation. He played the tape on an old machine in the corner. At first, all he heard was static, then faint voices. Michael Carter's voice. He was explaining the threats, talking about people following them, asking for protection. Then came Hale's voice, calm and reassuring. But the reassurance felt hollow now that Daniel knew the truth. The tape ended abruptly, as if someone had cut it off mid-sentence. Daniel leaned back, breathing out slowly. This tape had been enough to prove the Carters had reached out for help, but Hale had kept it hidden to silence their pleas. Now, years later, justice had at least begun moving. Still, the face of the woman in the trees haunted him. She didn't seem like someone random. She stood there, too calmly, too knowingly. She wasn't shocked by Hale's arrest. It was almost as if she expected it. Later that day, Daniel replayed the letters from Mrs. Carter in his mind. One line stood out: "If anything happens, she knows what to do." It had bothered him earlier, but now it made sense. Mrs. Carter had mentioned writing to her sister, and Daniel had never seen the sister's name in any official record. That meant she had stayed off-grid intentionally, maybe to protect herself, maybe to bring the truth out someday. Daniel requested access to the case's extended files, and after hours of searching, he found one mention of a woman named Evelyn Grant, Mrs. Carter's younger sister. She had lived in another city at the time, but after the family vanished, she had disappeared too, leaving no trace. The woman near the trees had her same age range, same features mentioned in old records, the same quiet posture. Evelyn hadn't abandoned the case. She had been following it from the shadows, waiting for the right moment. Maybe she never trusted law enforcement again after losing her sister. Maybe she believed the system was too compromised, but she had guided Daniel in her own subtle way. The message on the mirror, the evidence that suddenly appeared, the unmarked envelope. She didn't want credit. She wanted the truth. Daniel drove to the old forest area behind the Carter house the next evening. The sun was low, the air cool, and the silence peaceful. He didn't expect to find Evelyn, but he hoped leaving something behind might give her closure. He placed the wooden box with the letters near the base of an old tree, covered lightly with leaves. He attached a small note: "They deserved to be heard. Thank you for helping them speak." He stepped back, took a final look, and walked away. The next day, he returned. The box was gone. There were no footprints, no message, nothing to prove Evelyn had come. But Daniel didn't need proof. He knew she had been there. The silence around the clearing felt different, lighter, relieved. As the days passed, the story made headlines. Border officer arrested in decade-old family case. New evidence reveals hidden truth, and Carter family mystery reopened after 10 years. Public interest grew, and people demanded transparency. Hale faced multiple charges, and the authorities reopened all cases connected to the land dispute, giving families hope that their long-ignored voices would finally be heard. Daniel received calls from journalists, community members, and even old colleagues asking how he uncovered everything. He never mentioned Evelyn. Some stories were meant to be protected. He simply said he followed the evidence wherever it led on, that the truth always finds a way out. Weeks later, Daniel visited his mother's house for dinner. She had always worried that the cases he worked on would take too much from him, but this time, she smiled proudly. They sat together, sharing warm food and soft conversation. For the first time in a long while, Daniel felt at peace. Before leaving, his mother handed him a small package wrapped in plain paper. "Someone dropped this off earlier," she said. "Didn't leave a name." Daniel felt a familiar chill, not from fear, but recognition. He opened the package in his car. Inside was the final missing piece, a single photograph of the Carters taken a few days before they disappeared. They looked happy, relaxed, unaware of the storm approaching. On the back of the photo, a line was written in the same careful handwriting: "Now they can rest." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting that truth settle in his heart. The story wasn't about mystery anymore. It wasn't about fear, or darkness, or even justice. It was about a family finally being seen. It was about a woman who refused to let her sister's voice be buried. It was about how, even in silence, truth waits patiently for the right person to listen. Driving home, Daniel felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. The case was over. The truth was out. The Carter family, after a decade of being shadows in old files, finally had their story told. But the last lesson stayed with him, one he would carry into every case from now on. Sometimes the people searching for justice aren't the ones in uniforms or offices. Sometimes they're the ones standing quietly at the edge of the trees, watching, waiting, holding on to hope when everyone else has given up. And sometimes they're the ones who remind the world that even when years pass, even when secrets are buried deep, the truth never really disappears. It only waits for someone brave enough to follow it. With that thought, Daniel drove into the fading light, the story finally coming to its natural end, quiet, honest, and human.